This is the MFS Wellness Podcast, and I am Mike Sinopoli. And on this episode, we're addressing the correlation of free speech and mental health, among a few other topics. And for this discussion, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Chloe Carmichael to the show. Dr. Chloe is a clinical psychologist and USA Today best-selling author who prizes freedom of speech and independent thinking. She's been endorsed by Dr. Phil McGraw as one of the most trusted voices in emotional wellness and mental strength. Dr. Chloe, how are you? And thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you, Mike. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it. We linked up, and was able to look up some stuff about you, and you're very decorated, have a great past, and I'm really excited for this, especially the free speech thing, because it's gotten so, I don't know, convoluted throughout the years. Like it felt like when I was younger, free speech was this great thing we prided ourselves upon, and now it seems to be a controversial topic, huh?
Yeah, I mean, growing up as well, it never would have occurred to me that we would ever in our country have an issue about, freedom of speech. But it now seems to be, actually surprisingly controversial for many people. So I wanted, that's why I wrote the book, is I wanted to let people know freedom of expression is nothing to be afraid of. In fact, it's really good for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and we're going to get into that and talk about a couple of the books you've written, and I've started one of them. Very good stuff. But before we do that, for those listening who are maybe being introduced to you right now for the first time, would you like to give a little background and anything about yourself you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. So, I was a yoga teacher actually before I was a clinical psychologist decades ago. So I love the body-mind connection. I'm really interested in fitness and wellness overall. And that's actually what led me to become a clinical psychologist was really an interest in the body-mind connection and meditation. So then my previous book was about the healthy function of anxiety, which is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And I grew my practice in New York City. I was there for about 20 years and did really well there, had a lot of great media. And then during COVID, um, I was going to have to mask my then 3-year-old son. And that was really kind of the red line for me as a mom and as a psychologist. And so I started speaking out in the media about the harms of masking children, knowing that this was probably going to burn a lot of media bridges, maybe hurt my business. But I did it because I felt like I had to. And that was when I noticed that speaking freely and authentically, no matter what the consequences, was really good for my mental health, for cognitive, emotional, and social. And then I was like, well, how could I, as a clinical psychologist, be surprised? Like we're supposed to, it's obvious. So then I decided to, research it and write a book about the mental health benefits of free speech and how to access them.
Well, I think that's excellent. And, I share similar views as you as well, because during that COVID time, we had here's a story for you really quick with my daughter. There was a rumor that they were going to start eating their lunches on the gym floor on towels to stick to this mysterious 6 foot social distancing. And I called the school and I was told not to do it. Don't do it. Don't ruffle feathers. And I said, no, there is no, I called the superintendent and everything. And I was just like, there's no way my kid is going to be eating on the floor on a towel on the gym floor of all floors. And for in the name of health, like, I'm sorry, I draw lines that I'm going to speak out on something like that. So I hear you on that. I completely and wholeheartedly agree. And that's just kind of what that does. So,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was a great example of COVID was a great example of, how when we were not, quote, allowed to speak up about certain things, we lost a lot of our rational faculties,
hmm
Like it's really interestingly enough, it's one of the first things that happens in an abuser victim cycle is that the victim stops speaking up. And then by no longer naming like the issues and talking about what's weird, the victim starts to kind of internalize everything and normalize it all and uh, kind of dissociate. In psychology, we call it a cycle of first suppression, where you actively tell yourself not to say something, then repression, where it just kind of automatic, you're programmed to not speak up, and then denial, where you've been silent so long, so automatically that the truth stops occurring to you. It's almost like you brainwash yourself and you go into denial. And then people start making very strange and irrational decisions like, why don't we all eat on the floor? Or in New York, it was wintertime, we'll put them on buckets to eat outside individually alone, right?
I couldn't agree with you more. The weirdness around it all of what we went through to adhere to some policy that I don't know how science driven it really was, especially when you can just go to a restaurant, walk to the table in your mask, sit down, and then once you're seated at that table, you can remove your mask, eat your food, and the COVID would just fly over your head, right? So
Same on the airplane, right?
yeah. Oh, and don't get me started on the only one policy that I did adhere to was the lines on the grocery store aisles. Remember those? The arrows? Did you have those where you were at where they told you to they had the arrows on the floor so they kept people going in certain ways so they wouldn't cross paths as much? Did you see that?
Well, we did when I lived in New York, and there we literally had people with goggles and everything
Hmm.
else. And then I fled to the free state of Florida, and we all lived our lives perfectly normally.
Yeah, they were doing it. They were that was jealous of Florida because we were pretty bad here. And by adhering to those lines on the floor, I didn't follow that. I went the opposite way to make sure I didn't accidentally do it. So because I
Yeah,
was like,
good
this
for
is
you.
ridiculous, you know.
Yeah.
I did stand up for it, and there was even a time when my daughter was in preschool at that time, and she was walking into the preschool with me, and we had to stop at the door, and the instructor, her mask was like this. I didn't want her to wear it at all, and it was like half on, and she was like trying to put it on, and this woman was freaking out. She was like, no, 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 dude, don't, no, no, put it on, put it on. I'm like, you can't do that to a 4-year-old. I'm like, that you don't act that way. You're causing something that she doesn't need to hear. That fear and anxiety is going into her. You know what I mean? So that's
Totally.
just I just yeah. But anywho, we know how that is, and that really did spark a lot of free speech and everything. About to play devil's advocate, what are we doing out here now? Like, there's a lot of misinformation out there, disinformation too. Like, just not around COVID, but like everything. Like, where do we draw lines on free speeches to where we're, manipulating the public, putting out things that are, even in the diet industry, like there's been so much stuff that I've seen, I do nutrition and there's just so much misinformation and lies to sell. Like, where do we cross that, like that line? Where do we draw that line of free speech versus actual like manipulation though? Right.
Yeah, thank you. And I love the devil's advocate question. So please don't be afraid to do your worst on those.
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I know I'll get a good answer and response from
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
No, there's actually a whole chapter in the book called Common Objections to Free Speech. And one of them is, what about misinformation? And so it's the idea is that somehow we're going to reduce information by limiting speech, right? Whereas actually the opposite is true. So I give some examples in the book, like Galileo was jailed for the rest of his life for saying that the earth orbits the sun. My own profession used to do lobotomies, right?
Hmm.
And we have cases in the 1990s of physicians testifying to Congress that, cigarettes are not addictive, right? And in all of these cases, you would have so-called experts telling you that the science is settled, right? But obviously, we need to be able to have open debate, basically, no matter what we're talking about, because science is sometimes wrong. It would almost be an unreasonable expectation on scientists to suggest that they should never be wrong. Information evolves. Now, when it comes to advertising, you mentioned, say, about, medical claims and things like that. I do think that with, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, if you're going to advertise a product as, curing a disease or having a particular medical outcome, we do have laws about that. Just like within the First Amendment, we have restrictions about slander, libel, threats of violence. It's not like you can literally, I like to say I'm a First Amendment absolutist, not necessarily a free speech absolutist, because it's not like you can pick up your phone to order a hit on your neighbor and be like, haha, free speech.
Right, right, right.
So we do have certain legal limits, and that is a good thing.
Yeah, like free speeches, but there's consequences involved, right? So I think that's kind of how we have to look at it. Like the words carry weight and the actions that follow. I'd say that yeah, absolutely. So like with this whole thing in AI coming around now too, and I have this irrational fear, and maybe you can tell me if my fear is rational or not. But like with AI and how powerful it's becoming, and how it's manipulating and duping everybody already, where we already have what I think is a fake news crisis as it is. I see something that scares me of AI actually being able to like control our texts in a sense. Like I just you and I are say we're texting privately. It's so AI gets so involved in our speech that like I would try to send you something, but like it doesn't agree with the narrative that it will not send it to you. I don't know if that's irrational or not. Now I know I
We
sound,
already
you
saw
know.
that again during COVID. You could not send certain articles and things like that. People had that not only through DM systems, but even through actual SMS messages where there were certain things that they found just could not be sent.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about, and even growing more because now they have this the AI tool that can obviously probably monitor us, and it's just getting started. And what's your take on AI overall? I guess like, do you have you think it's going to be as fearful as are we as fearful as we need to be over it, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with it. So, I mean, I do use ChatGPT. I have a paid account, like I
Hmm.
like it. Um, but and I also am a Ring camera user subscriber, and I'm really freaked out by like I decline the Ring AI thing, like where they'll send you intelligent things where you can chat into it, like, did my spouse do such and such today or
Hmm.
whatever? Because then when you do that, you then consent to them, like, having access to the cameras inside of your home in a different way than what they have now. And I do think there's also a terrible problem of bias within AI, right? I've had multiple situations where I've asked AI for, information about, whether it be political or medical topics. And, it's just absolutely rife with bias. For example, I was asking some information. I was going to do an interview with Jack Posobiec about some trans issues. And it was telling me stuff that just made no sense. And like, so I think that people have to look at AI almost like Wikipedia. Like AI cannot be a primary source. It can be a fine sounding board, but you should always check and challenge like everything that you see in it. And I think you're raising some really good concerns about the privacy issues as well. I mean, we totally saw that happen again with COVID, where the government was secretly censoring what you could say on social media. And the secret part of that was like the worst because when we have a false sense of social consensus. Like if you go on social media and nobody's saying, hey, maybe it was a lab leak, but the government won't say or acknowledge that that's because they banned it, then you go on social media and you think you're the only person who thinks that. And we're supposed to have a certain amount of social awareness that if we have some weird idea that nobody else has, it's a healthy awareness to say, gee, maybe I should recheck that or whatever.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm missing something. So yeah, I think you're right. We shouldn't put it past the government to use technology to interfere with us, and it can have really bad effects on our mental health.
Yeah, it really is. And then you were right about that. ChatGPT is essentially, like you said, I loved how you said it was like Wikipedia in a way. You got to kind of filter through that and see where it's coming from. I look at it like a glorified Google search as well. You can get
Hmm.
some information from it, but I wouldn't let it be like your go-to therapist. Like it could give you some stuff, but you have to have your own thoughts. You can't let the machine, the robot think for you because somewhere there's a couple fighting right now and they're both going to ChatGPT instead of talking to each other and they're both getting validated and then they're going to come back and talk to each other and feel like each one's wrong and it's just going to get worse. I don't know. That's what I see happening sometimes. I think people want to just be validated more than they even want to actually make progress sometimes, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that can happen with a real actual therapist too. I work with a lot of therapists, like as far as training them sometimes. And yeah, I mean, the problem of therapists just constantly validating whatever the patient says because they're afraid of alienating the patient or, losing the income or whatever. It's that's a real problem, I think, within the therapy industry.
Yeah, that's scary to think about too. But you're there to get yourself help and all of that. But I do believe in cognitive therapy. You still think it's a valid thing to be doing, right? Cognitive therapy for everybody.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think even psychodynamic therapy is I don't really there's very few schools of therapy I would ever just like X out and say nobody should be doing that. But I do think that there's a crisis of competence amongst actual therapists. And there's also a big problem of political and ideological bias within therapists. Even when it comes, my favorite subject, the subject of free speech, a lot of therapists are leading the charge on limiting speech over concerns about, say, hate speech or bullying, or
Hmm.
as you said, misinformation or all these other things. And, they're well-meaning, but we all know what the road to hell is paved with. I think part of the issue has to do with the feminization of psychology. So I think the field is like 90% female right now. And what's interesting is that women will often express the need for power, which is a psychology measure. Everybody has a need for power, could be high, low, whatever. But women will often express that need for power by masking it through nurturance. So they'll be like, oh no, we just need to control what you say because it will be nicer. We're being nurturing. We're helping you.
Hmm.
Right. So I think that my field has a lot of problems, and I think people should be very cautious. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't send my child to just like a random therapist at this point. I would grill that person really hard first.
What are some questions then? If I have daughters, 11 and 8 years old, and that you raise a good point here, because that's not something I necessarily ever thought of, and they may need to go to therapy at some point, and I back that. But what type of questions would I ask a therapist to grill them to make sure that they're maybe not pushing an agenda more than they're actually out there to do what they're intending?
Yeah, I mean, well, especially when it comes to children, um, m- it would depend on the reason you're sending them, obviously. But I mean, in the book, I share a story about a couple that came to me. They're just friends of mine, and their daughter had, at the time thought that she was a boy, and so they'd been advised to take her to a therapist. Understandably, they were really afraid to do this because they were legitimately concerned that this quote therapist would affirm this delusion, rather than exploring the root of the delusion and help the daughter to come to peace with the fact that she's a girl. Um, and so I called around to multiple therapists in my own network, and I couldn't find a single therapist that was willing to approach this issue with what I think we now all recognize as common sense. The American Medical Association and whatnot have now kind of at least come around to saying that we shouldn't be putting chemical treatments or surgical treatments on minors. But this was several years ago.
Hmm.
So, I mean, just for example, if you had a child that was thinking that they were trans, I would need to have a very frank conversation with the therapist that we all understood that this is a girl
Yeah.
and that the goal of therapy is to help her understand that. Um, or, I mean, again, like people talk about self-harm or cutting. To me, it's really awful. But I remember being in graduate school and being taught that suicidal ideology is completely normal, and anybody who says that they've never had it is in denial. And I was like, well, I've never had it.
Yeah.
I'm not in denial,
Right. Right.
But that I share this in the book too, but that was kind of the beginning of my journey on self-censorship because I didn't actually raise my hand and say that. It was just what I was thinking. And so then I went through a long process of not speaking up about stuff, and ultimately like went through a journey of realizing that it would be better if I did. But yeah, I mean, so again with self-harm, like whatever the issue is, I would want to make sure that the therapist understood that we were on the same page together. I think the Take Your Child to Therapy um, program in many ways has really undermined the authority of the parents, and the parents are abdicating their authority to the quote expert, which ironically I think harms the child. Because in generally speaking, unless your child truly has a disorder, which I think is actually more rare than we believe, I think many times people take their kid to therapy as a way to, I don't know, can get into all of that. But
Hmm.
if you're taking your kid to therapy and they don't have like a genuine actual disorder where they're getting genuine actual treatment, all it's really doing is eroding the authority of the parental relationship, which I think actually creates more anxiety for the child.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with this whole trans push, is this new? Like, I mean, is this within the last, I know it's been around, but like it really feels like it's taken front and center here through like not front and center, but it's gotten so pushed in like over social media lately. Like, and we're supposed to accept it. I actually did a podcast interview a couple of years ago on a different show with some of the advocates out in California of the group Gays Against Groomers. And if you've heard of that,
Mm-hmm.
so we
Mm-hmm.
talked with them. They're just against the T
Mm-hmm.
basically
Mm-hmm.
in their alphabet. And what are they doing if they don't have an actual disorder? What are kids coming up? How is this becoming so prevalent? Is it just what we see? Is it just because of the internet?
A
Are they,
lot of things.
you
I
know?
mean, I think it's in part a social contagion issue, right? So we know that that happens. Like in the 80s when I was a girl, everybody had anorexia. Like it was,
Mhm.
like the
Right.
thing. And then for like a little while it was bipolar and borderline and cutting.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's trans. And so, yeah, I think on some level there can be a little bit of an attention seeking aspect to it. Also, developmentally, teenagers are primed to be shifting identities. That's actually a developmentally appropriate thing to do when you're a teenager. So it's a particularly sticky social contagion because it involves, changing your identity. And then we're also in this very strange time where, being white or being straight or, not having a mental health disorder, like the whole it's okay not to be okay thing has gone so far that it's almost like it's not okay to be okay,
Right. Right.
And so I think a lot of, you know, uh, people are young people are latching on to that as a kind of a diversity stone, of
Mhm.
affinity or whatever. So yeah, I think there's probably a lot of reasons. Also, as you mentioned, it feels like it's being glamorized through social media and, regular media and all those other things too.
It feels as if a term I'm sure you're familiar with, virtue signaling, is becoming a very big thing out there, which is to me very destructive because it's just people using whatever could be a legit disorder or something within, like, say, racism, for instance. There's people that stand up for it and all of that. And it does exist, obviously. But, like, are you using something that's an actual problem for someone to boost your own self? I feel like there's a lot of that going on. And we have to kind of like cling to the narrative a bit of where we're at. So I see that there's a lots of like obsession, maybe even with like labels too lately. Like everyone needs to fit in some sort of group and like say I'm this, this, and this, and like we have to. And if you don't fit this, this, and this, you're not really what it is. You're not really involved in our group. It's almost as if you have to go the whole way, and it feels like gray area and compromise are looked at now as like relinquishing your beliefs and your views. I feel like going too far into anything, whether it's a political view, a religious view, whatever it might be, if you go too far and hold it too much, you're not thinking for yourself any longer. You're letting a political ideology or a religious ideology think for you without using your brain. You see that being out there?
Oh yeah, totally. And, as you said as well, with like, virtue signaling and it feels good to be righteous, right? So, if I'm standing up to racism, of course I feel a boost in my own sense of worth because I'm fighting for something, a social justice warrior, right? You're fighting for something just and, you get pumped up and you have bonding with the people that you're doing that with. The only problem is that the social justice warrior needs somebody to fight. And I would love if all of these social justice warriors decided to go fight, the actual active slave trade in Africa or to stand up for women who are actually being subjugated in the Middle East, right? So
Hmm.
there's a wonderful time and place for social justice warriors. I just think a lot of it is misdirected and kind of comes out vilifying our friends and neighbors who are actually, not racist at all,
Hmm.
who might see issues differently. So we might have different opinions on about whether race-based affirmative action makes sense for college admissions, and we might both be against racism. But, one person thinks that race-based affirmative action helps to correct racism from the past. Another person thinks, well, it's actually just continuing racism now. Two people can have a disagreement and a discussion about that. But we don't need to start mudslinging and, canceling each other about that.
It feels like that's what happens. It feels like if you don't have all of the views that I have, it's an attack. It's like it's almost as if you need to fully commit into this. Like for instance, if I was to say that take the abortion issue too, like take that one. If I was to say that, hey, I do believe you sure, fine, pro-choice, go ahead. But if I said I do believe that is ending a life, I do believe that is the process of ending a life. Even if I could say that I would say, if you want to do it, go ahead. Some people aren't going to be okay with that. Even though if they're like raging pro-choice, they're you just want me to agree with everything your way. Like I already said that I'm on your side, but I'm not fully there. I still have a differing view. But like, at what point are you actually standing for the cause versus you being right? I guess in a sense, right?
Exactly. And so, you used an interesting phrase there. You said, that people will claim that it's an attack if you don't agree with them. And there's an interesting thing I unpack in the book, which is, can I say that? Why free speech matters and how to use it fearlessly. It's also now available on audiobook, which is really cool. But there's something in the book I share, which is called the secondary gains of victimhood. And that's not something I invented. I'm not trying to take credit for that. It's in any Psych 101 textbook. But it's important here because the secondary gains of victimhood, as the name implies, is that when you are a victim, there are secondary gains that are attached to that. And even legitimately, honestly, people make mistakes with that. The secondary gains are so attractive. The classic example in a Psychology 101 textbook is that a little girl breaks her leg and then everybody signs her cast. She misses gym class. She's almost like elevated because of this broken leg. And so when the doctor goes to take off the cast, she insists it's still broken. And she's not even lying. She has genuinely come to believe this because just unconsciously she's become so attached to the gains that she's become attached to the injury. And so if people can come by that so simply and honestly, you can imagine how it can also be used as a manipulation, right? So if we're in an argument, and that's why, again, I think it's gotten all mixed up with this anti-bullying conversation, which has its place. Like, I'm not an advocate for bullying, but I think ironically, the real bullies can be the people who want to label everybody else a bully and say, you're attacking me, you're bullying me, and therefore you have to shut up and you have to do what I want and you have to say what I want. Otherwise, you're bullying me. And that's my secondary gain of victimhood, is that I can demand accommodations from other people.
Yeah, and when we do that, we cheapen the actual issue. Like it's like Boy Who Cried Wolf in a sense. It's like, oh, you're going to label every single thing I say because you disagree with me. You're going to label it racist. You're going to call me a bigot. You're going to say all these things to me. But what you're doing is, you're pushing people away from the actual issue. Like if you're going to call everything racism, everything is this, everything is that, you're taking away from the actual victims. I think if you're going to play the victim, and I think victim mentality is actually an epidemic in our world right now. I think that we don't even know we do it, and I think that it's just one of those things that keeps everybody stuck, suppressed, and arguing with each other. And they go off and sound off on social media, and everybody just wants to hold on to that excuse that keeps them in a victim state for the gains, like you said. I think that was said very well. That's awesome. That's a way to
Well,
put that.
thanks. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
I agree with what you're saying, and I think it really does connect, with wellness, with, that body mind connection and fitness, actually, because one of the hallmark symptoms of depression is actually a sense of helplessness. And so when we over-identify with the victim role because of some perceived gain, we're ultimately, of course, undermining ourselves. And, the healthy function, as I said, of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And verbalizing is actually one of our primary ways of creating preparation behaviors. We talk to our support network. That's why therapy hinges on talking. When we name our emotions, our amygdala starts to, settle down. When we talk a problem through, we become more rational and cognitively sharp about it. Our cortisol levels begin to drop. So when we're stifling the people around us or ourselves from, speaking the truth and being open and honest, we're actually really hurting, our cognitive processes, our neurological processes. We're not having good, high quality social support if everybody has to mask themselves because of fear of cancel culture. And I mean mask in the
I know what you mean.
pretend self-censorship sense.
Hmm. Well, as far as censorship goes, I am a straight white male who has some financial literacy in his brain, and I feel like I can't talk about anything because it's like talk about getting silenced. Like if I want to say I make even like I mentioned abortion, like I've been told by I don't have a say. I can't talk about it. My view does not matter. Racism, I can't talk about it. It doesn't matter. I even no matter what, like no matter what my stance is, I just get shut out because of being a straight white male. I am almost like your opinion doesn't matter here because you're privileged and this and that. So I get a lot. I hear that. I've heard it been called that. Like, do you think that's a form of censorship in itself, right? Just in a way.
Well, okay, so I'm going to challenge you a little bit.
Let's do it.
Um, and I just want to say I fell into all of that myself as well. I've also been lectured about my privilege, and I have, in the past shut up because I was afraid of being called racist or anything else. I used to be afraid to wear my cross. I would always tuck it into my sweater, for example. Um, so I would just say that there's a difference between censorship and self-censorship. And we have to take ownership. And I mean we, myself included. One of the techniques I share in the book is that if you realize that you have been keeping a lot inside because of fear of what others will say, when you start speaking up, which hopefully you will, is my goal for people that read the book to understand the mental health benefits of speaking up and the costs of stifling yourself, that when you start speaking up, that you take ownership of it yourself. So if I decide to start speaking back to my Aunt Polly, who previously used to make jokes about, pro-lifers, and I'm like, well, I've been smiling and nodding about your jokes all these years, but in fact, that's actually me. I'm pro-life. I have to do it in a way that takes ownership, where I say, you know what, Aunt Polly, I just want you to know I've been smiling and nodding and acting as if I agreed with your jokes because I was afraid of conflict. And I had in my mind the idea that you couldn't or wouldn't tolerate a diversity of opinions. And I apologize that I put that on you and that I held back. And so I just want you to know I'm going to be speaking up. I'm going to be more outspoken and more authentic. It's not to push you away. It's actually so that we can be real. We can be closer, and closeness sometimes involves friction. So, the challenge, Mike, I'm trying to say here is that yes, people said those things to you, and yes, they might have threatened you, but unless they actually yanked you from your platform, they didn't censor you. You did self-censorship.
True story. You're right. And that is a form of me censoring myself because I gave into that. And that is what's dangerous out there. And I think a lot of people are very fearful of speaking out based on what we've seen. We've seen, people that make money through their social media. They use that as a platform for income. And I am one of those people. So therefore I do have that fear of if speaking out, especially like through one of my accounts through maybe Instagram or Facebook or something like that, that I'm going to get reported. Or, I have this here's another one. Like I was on a health website. I put out a comment that was so just, there was nothing divisive about it. Yet somebody will still find something to get upset about. And then they were coming at me. And I'm like, I'm waiting. I'm going to look at my Google reviews to see if this person found me to go ahead and slander me through that. So that's another hard part of it. And then where I do want to always speak my mind, and technically I think I do and will for the most part, but I do get concerned that, hey, you're going to get reported or something like that because it doesn't fit in with whatever's policy or terms Meta has right now. And somebody out there that's angry is going to report it, and I'm shut down and I can't promote my business. So,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying?
Well, I do, and I think especially um, several years ago that was more of a true concern. That if you said, "Hey, a man cannot become a woman," like they literally would shut down your account. So
Mm,
I think that's fair, and but I think hopefully now at this point the kinds of things that we want to say, just simple, basic, facts or opinions. I don't think will get us, yanked from social media as much as they used to. And, one other just parallel I want to make here
Hmm.
is that there is a difference between self-censorship and healthy self-restraint. So, and I talk about this in the book that self-censorship is where you're being inauthentic about what your real, actual, true values are. Healthy self-restraint might be like your mother-in-law says, "Do you like my new haircut?" And you're like, yeah. Like we don't, it's okay to have a filter, but the self-censorship, do you know where the word censor comes from?
No, I don't think I do if I think about
It's
it.
yeah, it's interesting. I share this in the book too. Is back in the Roman Empire, they would have these soldiers that were called censors, and the censors would ride around to all of the little, Roman territories and inform people what opinions and values and religion and everything else, were acceptable.
Hmm.
And so if you feel like, you're speaking and you're almost afraid one of those censors is going to pull up on you, like that's the self-censorship territory. So yeah, I mean, I would just and for people that just feel like, maybe they're in a college classroom and they're like, hey, if I speak up, I really will get failed. A few options, you can uh, upload, as you said, policies and documents into, say, ChatGPT if it's legal in your state and say, I'm thinking of speaking up, what exactly could happen to me? Like, what is the university's policy on this? How can I arm and protect myself, with information? Um, or if, you can have an ally in the class, you can say, hey, I'm going to speak up. Can you just like back me up a little bit when I do that?
Hmm.
Or, consider recording it, maybe a Project Veritas situation. But lastly, if for whatever reason you just cannot speak up, make sure that although you may not be able to speak up in class or wherever, at least journal your real thoughts and at least hopefully have real talk and conversations where you debrief with a friend about what you really think, because we don't want to go into that suppression, repression, denial cycle. So I urge people to try to speak up and be bold in public. But if for whatever reason you can't, at least find ways to do it in private. Don't, because the gift of language, it's almost like breathing. We don't think about it, but it's actually doing really important things for us. And if we mess with it, we can actually mess with our mental health.
Yeah, I can see that correlation. That's very well said. And how do you feel about, like you mentioned, in the classroom, taking it another step further as life progresses into the workplace? I know there's a level of professionalism that we want to have, and I do agree with it, and I do think that's necessary to be there. But do you feel there's a lot of inauthentic ways in our, mainly say white collar workplace, things like that, to where we're censoring each other in a way, or we're being so non ourselves that it's actually causing any type of mental issues for people, to where they have to show up every day, 9 hours a day, and basically pretend, in a sense? I know it's a little bit of a gray area, but I always feel like the we're so policy driven in the workplace that we almost lose ourselves, can't be ourselves. And do you feel like that's a place too, or do you think that's a different story?
I do. And I want to answer that, but I just want to
Sure.
also say first from a moment ago, it's been bugging me that you had said that you're sometimes told as a man that you can't talk about abortion, or as a white person that you can't have an opinion on race. That's the kind of thing I would really urge you to answer back. Please don't let people cut out your tongue, like answer back, let them know that in fact, of course, men have an opinion about
Hmm.
their offspring,
Yeah.
In fact, of course, white people who largely actually led the charge to eradicate racism around the globe had some strong opinions about racism. And in fact, the world is a better place, for the promulgation of many of those opinions. Um, but yeah, in the workplace, I think it's okay for an employer to say, like, we don't talk about politics in the workplace. The problem is that because the liberal to conservative ratio, say, for example, in academia, if academic faculty, the liberal to conservative ratio is about 20 to 1. In journalism and in HR departments, they just tend to skew very liberal. And so they don't even mean to do it, but they say we can't talk about politics. And then they will put out the Pride Month, or they will say, we're going to have an ice out rally or, whatever the case
Mm-hmm.
may be. And they don't even realize that they're being political. They're saying we're not going to talk about politics, but yet leftist politics can permeate the policy. Or they'll say, well, we all just have to start putting our pronouns into our, Zoom bios, but we're not talking about politics, right? So I think that can be a difficult place if you're in the workplace. And thankfully, I've been invited, surprisingly, to speak to some large corporations and universities about these topics. I thought that I would become a total persona non grata, but
Mm-hmm.
some of them have actually invited me to speak, which has been awesome. So again, I think it's fine if your workplace is just like, don't talk about politics. But if you feel like it's a lopsided environment where certain, like everybody can wear a BLM pin, but you can't wear a pro-life pin or, whatever the
Right.
case may be. Um, those are situations where I might encourage you to talk to an employment lawyer to find out like, hey, is this just in my mind or is this like a hostile work environment specifically to certain viewpoints again? Because it's okay if a corporation says no politics, but if they're allowing certain politics but not others, then it may be time to just first of all find out from an employment lawyer. And if you are indeed correct, then depending on what they suggest, maybe you'll have a conversation with your HR department in private in a collaborative way and say, hey, I respect that this is a politics-free zone. I'm just noticing X, Y, and Z feel political, and I actually have opinions contrary to those, but yet I don't feel I can express them because it's a political free zone. But yet those opinions are promulgated everywhere. And I'm just wondering if we might be able to tone down the politics in a more even keeled sort of a way. Um, on the other hand, though, Mike, I agree with you that it would be great if, coworkers could go out to lunch or happy hour and acknowledge that they have political differences if we didn't have to be in a total verbal straitjacket all the time. A true safe space is one where people can have disagreements and still be friends, right? So that would be the dream.
Absolutely. And do you think it's gotten more, I believe it has gotten more polarizing. I read a book called The Coddling of the American Mind a few years ago, if you heard of that one.
Hmm.
It's a good one. But I've seen that they put a graphic up that said that like around maybe 2011 or 2012 or so that the polarization amongst different things like class, religion, gender, all that, but political party was the one that really elevated highly around 2012, which was when social media like really took off. And I think what's happening here, do you feel like the dehumanization of people through the screens is giving people more of this just raw emotion that they're so emotionally invested in their politics and in what they believe. And when we're yelling and arguing on the internet, we see an icon and a text, and we formulate a whole opinion on somebody just based on a couple of words through our own filtered perception lenses and conditioning. So do you think that like this is becoming one of the drivers of this polarization that we're seeing? Is this the dehumanization through screens and this extremist way?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And that is a great book by Jonathan Haidt, The Coddling of the American Mind. But yeah, I do think that social media has created a sense of, dehumanizing and, quick conversations that aren't real conversations. And I think that degrades the quality, of course, of our political discourse. But also on social media, um, there it's such a lopsided place again where certain viewpoints literally get elevated and boosted in the algorithm, and others until recently have been extremely deplatformed and throttled down. And when we don't have open dialogue and we have to keep things inside because we know otherwise we'll get deplatformed, that actually creates a lot of tension that causes us to bottle things up. Dialogue and discourse is one of our ways of, emotional regulating or learning to see other people's viewpoints and things like that. So I think it's like a perfect storm where on one level, yes, just the simple fact of social media, even if it weren't policed and skewed the way it is, could be difficult. But then when you also have this weird, you know, um, pressing of the thumb on the scale for certain viewpoints versus others, it can create a grandiosity in one side and a sense of anger in the other. So yeah, I think social media may have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I was always had said to myself that the perfect storm of just crap is basically the politicians, that ideology plus the microphone that they get through social media and the way they can reach everybody. Because I don't feel as if, and maybe it was just because I was younger when I was younger before social media hit. It didn't feel like everyone was so politically aligned with anything. It almost felt like it's more of a cultish niche. And again, that could just be my age, but I think it does play a role that we have this connectivity with these phones and these misleading headlines and this biased agenda. And now I think we're just very mentally messed up due to the fact, too, that we don't know what's right and what's wrong, what's true, what's not. And like we were saying before with AI, I just think it's going to really start to take off and people are going to argue about what's real and what isn't. And I still think people, and I don't know if you believe this too, but they're going to, even if it's real or not, they're going to just gravitate and share what backs their beliefs. I think that's still what they're doing.
Confirmation bias.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And I've seen a lot of that. Like, people like I'm sure we've all seen situations and stories about like with ICE where, somebody sent me this story and they were like, oh, see, look, ICE dragged this poor disabled woman from her car and she was just an autistic woman trying to get to her doctor's appointment and they just threw her on the ground and she was trying to leave. Look at this. And it was like a close-up video of this happening. ICE, thankfully, posted to their Twitter account the full bird's eye view. The woman had plenty of room. She was like literally refusing to leave. And then her background is that she's a professional activism trainer and organizer, so there's like, and
Mm-hmm.
she has a history of criminal trespassing, and her Twitter handle was like, your friendly neighborhood deniable asset, and this woman testified, to Congress recently, and even there, she wasn't challenged at all because it was only a hearing that was chaired by uh, Congress people that shared her perspective that ICE, is a bunch of oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's permeated our politics, but also our journalism. That liberal to conservative skew that I mentioned in faculty is also present in journalism departments. It's like it's even worse. It's like 26 to 1. And
Ugh.
so if you think about it, your average journalism department maybe has 10 or 12 faculty members. So that means the whole department in many cases just has one political viewpoint. And then they're only admitting students that take their viewpoint, and then they're teaching them and, intensifying that viewpoint. And then we end up where if you search this woman's name, her name is Aliyah Rahman. Um, if you search her name, you'll see 100 stories about the narrative that my friend sent me. And my friend wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just reading the news.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really dig to find the New York Post story and whatnot that share, and go to the ICE account to learn about the other context.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's just getting everybody riled up in mental health is just like what's real anymore and what's true or not. I had somebody yell at me once because just simply because I had a question and they were freaking out. It was right after the election. I think it was some TikTok stuff that was out there, and they were hearing stories about kids getting ripped out from schools and all of this. And I just simply was like, well, did we see it happen? Is there documented accounts of it? What's the source? This person's source was that somebody on TikTok on a street corner said that they saw it, and they were reacting to that. And I'm just like, well, we have to confirm this that this is legitimate. But I was attacked for that, and I'm like just like I'm not sitting here telling you it didn't happen. I said, did you see it happen, and did you look through it more?
Well,
No,
also, if
I was
children
attacked.
are removed from school, it may be because their parents have been arrested. So, like,
Right,
what are they supposed to just like let the kids come home at the end of the day to a totally empty house?
right.
But yeah, I mean, I know the bigger point that you're making, of course, is that you were just trying to have a conversation and people go and, kind of jump from A to L and vilify you. I know we're coming to the end of our time, but one quick interesting fact about
Yeah.
that stuff is that when our heart rate goes above 100 beats per minute, we're not thinking rationally. So that's why, for example, we have to practice fire drills because, like, we can't remember how to leave a building when, we get up in a tizzy. And so, understandably, when people are seeing these, graphic images online and they're told these, simple snippets of stories, person dragged from car, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
their heart rate goes up, and then they're not thinking in a careful, methodical, rational way. And so there's a lot of techniques in the book as well about how to listen carefully to people and how to slow conversations down, in part so that you can hear and understand them better, but also in the secret manipulative side, because then they'll be more inclined to listen and hear you better too. So I do hope that people check it out because
Oh,
I didn't write the book to get rich. I wrote it more as a public service announcement.
well, I'm excited to get into it because I did start Nervous Energy because, well, that's my middle name too. But at the same at the same time, I am looking forward to getting into it. Now, do you address one more question before we kind of close it up a little bit here? But do you address like, okay, so after that, and maybe it's not in the book, but just a question. So once somebody has that kind of blow up and maybe they calm down, do you think ego kicks in? Because I feel like we also have an ego problem here where people just will not accept that they were ever wrong. So like maybe that comes out there, but they still will never truly admit it to that. Oh yeah, I did overreact. I did react to a story that was false. I've had this happen with family members too, in regards to a news story about say they were accusing a right wing person of burning down a church, but it was actually turned out to be that it was a different person from the church of a left wing, and they were doing it. It was just it got all ugly. But people don't seem to ever want to hold themselves accountable. It seems after even they've been factually proven that hey, maybe you weren't accurate to start. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I jumbled that too much though.
No, no, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's really hard for people to acknowledge, when they're wrong. And we can't control, of course, what other people do. We can't make them acknowledge that. Ironically, the harder we try, the less likely they might be to do it. It's like squeezing sand, right? But there are just a couple of techniques that I might suggest from the book. One of them is to transfer the grace, I call it. And so if you're speaking to somebody who's, on their ridiculous, arrogant high horse, silently imagine a time from your own history where you were on your arrogant high horse about a political opinion or whatever that you had that now makes you cringe. And now, frankly, it's a little embarrassing for you to reflect back at that point in your life. And then silently forgive yourself for that silliness of yours. And then transfer that openness to the other person and just realize, that maybe they're just having a moment a little bit. And even though it's silent, it usually will change, even in a subtle way, the expression on your face and everything else. And that can sometimes by itself even help the other person to calm down. And also, when you realize again that you are getting engaged in that way with somebody in that standoff feeling, first of all, congratulate yourself. Because as you said, it's so hard for people to admit that stuff because they know it's embarrassing. And so they block it out. They block it out from their awareness. So you can flip the script on that by the first thing when you realize that you're getting a little extra, congratulate yourself. Say, good for me. I caught it. It's so much better to be aware of this than not. And then, there's some other exercises in the book about, learning how to create a sense of openness and
Mhm.
relaxation and understanding sometimes that the goal is to preserve the relationship or to have an authentic dialogue where there's disagreement without a goal of persuasion. And reminding yourself of that goal as well sometimes can be helpful.
That's very well said. And yes, that was me in the past too. I was very much more cringy with my views and keeping them and holding them. But in the way I train my clients, with nutrition and things, I do lead out with empathy and meeting them where they're at in my own and use my own examples of failures and struggles to kind of just show that hey, that's just the way this is. And I think that's helpful to admit your own faults to kind of get into that to find that common ground and get there. So all right, so with the book, can I say this? This is now where can we listen to this or read this? Where's the best places to go
Yeah.
to get our hands on this?
It's called Can I Say That? Why
Sorry.
Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. Thankfully, it's available everywhere books are sold. It's Kindle, hardback, and Audible. So you can go to Amazon is usually the easiest place. And if you get it at Amazon or anywhere else, please leave a review because that helps so much to get the message out. Or you can go to freespeechtoday.com. At freespeechtoday.com, it goes to just my website where the book is linked along with all of my social media. I'm especially opinionated on Twitter sometimes. So if you enjoy that kind of thing, then follow me there.
Okay. Well, I will check that out. And then your website is drchloe.com, correct? That's where we.
Right, but it's so hard for people, I've noticed for whatever reason. So I
Mhm.
just forwarded freespeechtoday.com
Okay.
to drchloe.com. But if you can remember to drchloe.com, people can go there. It all goes the same place.
Perfect. And I do apologize for using the incorrect word in your
No
title.
problem.
My
No
bad.
problem.
So thank you so much. And anything else you'd like to say to close this up today? I really enjoyed talking with you, and it was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Me too. Yeah, just in closing, I would invite people, again, if you get the book or just even had thoughts and opinions about this episode, feel free to tweet them at me, whatever, email me through my website. I truly love dialogue, including disagreements, so I'm open.
Okay, great. And if you need to get in touch with me, I'm on social media. It's at MFS Wellness, usually Instagram, X, or Facebook would be best. And I have a website, mfswellness.com, and my email address, mike@mfswellness.com. So for Dr. Chloe, thanks for being there. Get out there, speak your mind, do it respectfully, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.